And we're here with the final game on the list, Astral Chain, a cyberpunk dystopian future with a slick cop exterior. It's a recipe for success. Couple that with some interesting gameplay and, we're actually getting a little bit ahead of ourselves as we have to take a look at Platinum's history. It is a retrospective here and examine one of their biggest and most heartbreaking failures. None other than the game Scalebound. Scalebound was going to be another huge breakout IP from Platinum Games. Its director was Hideki Kamiya. Fresh off the release of Bayonetta 1, he wanted to release an action RPG set in a sci-fi medieval world. Thus the first prototype for Scalebound was made, and at the time no one wanted to pick it up, so Hideki and his team shelved the game and started work on Wonderful 101. Well, some time passes, Microsoft and Platinum decide to collab, and boom, the dream creation begins. A game where you listen to rock and dubstep, control a dragon, tackle massive bosses, and a co-op quest to enjoy? Yeah, this game sounds and looks incredible. However, off the bat, you could tell from the trailers it had a couple of issues, mainly when it came to the game's sporadic frame rate and choppy quality. Scalebound chugged along through development for a while until it was cancelled in February of 2017. The issue? Both Platinum and Microsoft were unsatisfied with the game's quality. The constant frame rate issues and restrictions on Platinum's creative freedom caused a strain on Scalebound's development cycle, thus leading to its cancellation. Quite the sad tale, but out of this many people moved on from Scalebound to work on another long-awaited Platinum IP, Astral Chain. Astral Chain was originally going to be a fantasy world where players would use magic and the sort during battles, but after the team watched a couple of seasons of Appleseed and Ghost in the Shell, they scrapped all the fantasy world stuff and created a cyberpunk world instead. So with the combat designer of Nier Automata and becoming the director of Astral Chain, things can only go up from here, right? I mean, this game's gonna have all sorts of unique combat mechanics too, being able to control your legion while controlling your character, 3 different weapons to switch in between and from during combat, lots of interesting bosses to fight and enemies to take out. This game is just a recipe for success. I mean, we got the Nier Automata people working on it, Hideki Kamiya backing the project. This game's gotta be a banger. With that all out the way, all the developmental stuff, let's get straight into Astral Chain and my personal thoughts on the product. First and foremost, the story. We begin the game with an evil scientist experimenting on some outworldly creatures. The experiment goes somewhat according to plan, and we quickly jump over to our main character riding on a sweet looking motorcycle as you travel through the neon lit city. You meet up at the recon point and see the police force dealing with the same strange outworldly creatures we saw earlier. We learn their names are called chimeras. After rescuing some officers, you meet up with your brother Akira to go tackle some objectives side by side. You eventually run into your dad, Max, who is sort of a big shot over at this special organization called Neuron. Neuron uses a device which unleashes a changed chimera, aka legions, that are used to fight and control these aberrations, these strange creatures and weird portals. Things go haywire as predicted, and your brother Akira and the main character gain legions and begin fighting off these evil chimera. After the fight, you're officially added into the Neuron team, and it's up to you to shut down the redshift portals, defeat the chimeras, and save the world. Now, since this is a newer game, I'll spare you guys of the details as I don't want to have any spoilers on the game. Instead, I'll be saving those towards the end of the video, so if you want my full thoughts, stay tuned. However, I'll give you guys my abridged thoughts as of now, and to be fair, I just wasn't the biggest fan of Astral Chain's core story. It has some decent moments and some pretty fun twists at times, but the biggest flaw to me personally is how nonsensical and contrived a lot of plot points are in this game, and these are like a lot of major plot points. Things start to get way out of hand for no reason. It makes the entire experience pretty frustrating in the long run. And, well, don't tell me that's just how Platinum games are in a nutshell. Platinum games are outrageous and crazy, and their story beats are always wild, but they somehow stay in the lanes and never feel nonsensical in the game's world, rather just an extension of what's going on in the game's story. However, again, without spoiling anything, Astral Chain has way too many moments thrown in there just for the heck of it, and it really frustrates me. It feels like a poorly paced anime, and well, that's not the Platinum games I've come to love throughout looking through this retrospective series. I see Platinum as the Studio Trigger and Gainax of games, right? They make the most high octane and crazy experiences known to man, but what do both of these things have in common is they still have a ton of heart. They have real world themes and a personality that makes me fall in love with them. Similar to shows like Gurren Lagann. Yes, I know that's a Gainax game, but trigger directors and stuff. Let me have this, alright? Kill the Kill, and especially their most recent release, Promare, all handle these real-world themes and characters pretty realistically, despite being in a world with giant mechs and post-apocalyptic wastelands. However, with Astral Chain, I don't feel any of the heart here due to the game's narrative-wise feeling rather rushed. Just a rush to get to the next plot twist and story beat and keep the story moving at incredibly fast speeds, yet somehow the game is lasting me 17 hours. This is a super huge issue towards the end of the game, as it feels like the story should end, but it just keeps going and cramming more and more into the story, and even new game mechanics that you barely get a chance to use as they're only there for like a chapter or two. All for the sake of a predictable plot twist and what feels like a padded yet rushed length. I also had a hard time connecting with any of the characters in the main story. There were some funny ones like Lappy the dog, and who was a cute mascot and deserves all the love, but your brother took a while to grow on me, but towards the end I decided to start respecting my mans a little bit more. I kinda saw where he was coming from. With better pacing and a more focused narrative, I feel like the family dynamic would have worked out better, but as of now it was serviceable with some high points here and there. The story wasn't bad by any means. If I really shut my brain off and stopped looking too far into things, it's a pretty enjoyable anime fest, with some great cutscenes and some pretty standout, incredible boss fights, and the boss fights in this game are really good. Also, speaking of great, just look at this game. The art style is surprisingly generic and safe for a Platinum game, but the actual graphics on display, especially for the Switch, are outstanding. The game's gorgeous neon lit cities and the dingy, distorted astral planes, which really do a great job of showing the dichotomy between two worlds. The only complaint I have with the design is the rather repetitive astral planes. They all function differently, true, but a majority of the levels feel and look the same, often making me feel confused navigating through them like I've been here before again and again. The astral planes do offer these Breath of the Wild-esque puzzles, forcing you to use your Legion skill to the fullest in order to complete each room. While a good idea in concept, the execution of some of these are surprisingly poor, mainly just the beast running sections and the axe sections. They both feel really janky, mainly running with the Beast Legion and his weird auto dodge mechanics, as you have to dodge weird pillars coming at you from all sides and the blocks are falling from underneath you. That doesn't work out well with this game's camera and controls. I feel like they could have scrapped that and maybe just took the hit, or maybe throw a boss fight in there where it kind of requires you to use your Beast Legion. I don't know, something to spice it up, because that didn't work out, Chief. I just feel like the execution and puzzle solving aspects of the astral planes could have been a bit better. The investigation aspects, on the other hand, they were a delight to play through, and for the most part, I enjoyed this slew of minigames and side quests that were on display here. They were a healthy break from the combat and astral plane sections, from solving kids' riddles, to eavesdropping on random people, to kicking a can to a cat. Yeah, this one was really aggravating to say the least, but credit where credit is due. They offer enough to keep the game feeling fresh. Oh, and the UI is obviously clean. It's smooth and works well, and it's pretty easy to navigate. I also just love how it's basically a hologram PDA, which is a neat little touch. Overall, Astral Chain is a pretty good game, right? It's a decent Platinum affair with some great visuals, a so-so story, but really fun side characters that basically carry it. And okay, I'm sorry, fine. We have to talk about the combat. I'm sorry guys, I just wasn't a fan of Astral Chain's combat system. In the early game, it was really rough. Towards the end, I started getting the hang of it and enjoying it, especially in the middle sections, but overall, I just wasn't the biggest fan of everything in here. Firstly, let's go over how the game controls, and then some of the things that I liked and didn't like. The game gives you a dodge button, Legion call and recall button, sub weapons and a healing item to use with the shoulder buttons, a Legion ability, which is a special move which can be used in both combat and puzzle encounters. These Legion abilities can range from a shield protecting you to riding your arm Legion like a mech and unleashing a rapid blow to a chimera's face. You also have 6 separate skill trees to mess around with, as each Legion has their own set of moves to unlock and damage to upgrade as you play throughout the game. Sadly, most of these Legion's moves do function the same, each having a launcher, a 360 AoE, and a unique move for each Legion to perform. Now, as cool as these moves are, it's often hard to combo with them, mainly thanks to the process being really cumbersome. It's another layer of frustration that has me wishing I could control the Legion in person individually instead of having an auto attack system in place. Basically, to explain it, you have to do say like a 360 degree on your controller while pressing ZL to fire out a Legion AoE move. but during this process you're moving its chain around, or sometimes it doesn't move around at all, sometimes it doesn't register it, and your character standing completely still while being swarmed by enemies. You guys kind of get the issue here. It can get a little bit cumbersome and overwhelming at times as enemies swarm you, so it's usually best to just let your Legion do its auto attack thing and get right back to mashing. And there are ways they could have made this combat work since it's a puppet-like system. I mean, Devil May Cry 5 did it with V earlier this year, and fighting games alone have proven that you can do puppet-like combat while still having full control over both parties pretty easily. When I work with my Legion, the biggest issue is that I feel like we're both on autopilot, right? The Legion's out there mashing auto attacks as I feed it abilities, maybe do a couple sync calls, the usual stuff, while I'm out here mashing Y and again occasionally calling it back just for a couple sync attacks and the sort. Instead of combat being a rewarding feedback loop, it comes off as stagnant and feels like it never evolves with your character's progression. You get a new Legion, but you're still kind of running the same tactics. Your character gets some new moves, but you're not using them too often. And now that's not to say the game doesn't try to do some cool stuff, using the Axe Legion to shield yourself from devastating attacks and its blue shield skill, or using the Beast Legion to run away from quick projectiles and howling to stun enemies, and all that stuff is pretty fun in spurts, but the combat as a whole just feels way too clunky for me and really slow paced. Switching in and out of Legions feels like a chore, and you either A, have to cycle through them by mashing L, or B, use the circle to select. Now again, both of these methods aren't too bad, it's just acting out everything which is the hard part, and it's cumbersome and slow and unfun. I also really had a tough time trying to get my Legion to lock onto the right targets, especially in crowded battles. Sometimes I wanted it to perform certain actions or use skills in a particular environment, and due to the camera jank and auto attacks locking onto the wrong chimeras, the Legions more often than not felt like they weren't working. And sometimes they just don't fight at all, which is really annoying considering every Legion's on this timer. And the chain jumps, my gosh, they're so finicky. Sometimes they work, other times you get stuck on chimeras or objects you don't want to get stuck on. The perspective might shift and send you plummeting to your doom. Ugh. Oh, and also if you don't have your Legion, you can't jump at all, which removes a huge part of combos, considering, you know, aerial combos are kind of fun to pull off and stuff. So you basically need your Legion by your side at all times to make the game even remotely more fun, or fun in general. And since it's burdened to this ridiculous meter in the early game, it's often always running on empty unless you're stocking up on astral energy juices, power-ups, and all that type of stuff. It just makes the game, once again, feel a little bit convoluted and contrived just for the sake of it. Sure, like I said, you can stock up on items, but these also have really long animations which get in the way of combat. Towards the end game, this complaint is pretty much void thanks to the amount of ability codes you can equip to your Legion to extend the length they have per call, along with many other upgrades such as attack speed, defense, self-destruction damage, the list goes on and on. So pick some up and experiment. The game offers a way to make energy back as well by defeating baddies and clearing their redshift, but also if your Legion gets hit at all, it'll take damage and lose meter, not to mention it's constantly losing meter on a timer, which is an issue considering it's an auto attack machine. You'll really see this issue come into play with the finish off mechanic. Certain Chimera you can pull their cores out and I guess inject it into you or something like that to regain your life gauge and your blue meter astral energy gauge thingy. The downside is since you're always auto attacking and usually on the offensive or whatnot, and sometimes again due to the targeting system, you can't completely target exactly where you want to press A and finish off these bad guys, which means you'll be missing out on some valuable health at times, which is really infuriating. When it works, again, it's a really cool mechanic and a nice way to get some gene codes to level up your Legion and, you know, stay fresh with the game, but sometimes it doesn't work, which again leads to repetition, tedium, boredom, and a lot of infuriating moments when you can't, you know, clutch out a boss or something because you didn't get to finish off a enemy at end time before a big wind-up attack hits you or something of that nature. It just adds another layer of frustration to the game. Oh, and speaking of those gripes, I probably should explain what these Legions do. You have the Sword Legion, who has a blade slash rip straight from Metal Gear Rising, a Bow Legion, who is self-explanatory, the Arm Legion, who you can mount and float over small puddles with, as well as being a JoJo simulator, the Beast Legion, who, you know, you ride it like a beast, the Axe Legion, he brings up a blue shield and protects you from basically everything, And to be honest, most of these are really situational as described earlier, and some are even shoehorned into combat, like severing the bond between two chimeras with the Sword Legion, or using the shield ability to protect yourself from faraway projectiles. These abilities aren't truly tested until the last boss, which, oh boy, we'll get to later. Overall, the combat has some interesting things going for it, and again, when it works, it's really good fun. The boss fights also do a really surprisingly good job of highlighting this, and there's a healthy amount of variety in said fights. But the poor lock-on camera, and well, the camera in general, is surprisingly bad for this game. The clunky combat, repetitive commands, the boring combat structure, and the fact that your Legion only works when it feels like working, which isn't often, unfortunately. All of this really holds the game back for me. Unlike, say, a game like Nier Automata, which is another Platinum game with, say, a boring combo structure, what makes up for it is the game's plug-in chips and the bullet hell segments and the way it really breaks up the gameplay. As for your main character, they control okay. You have 3 weapons to toy around with thanks to the weapon-changing X-Baton. The baton, which is a rapid-fire, quick melee strike, which has a 360 and charge attack variation and also a delay move, which can work in all sorts of combos. These moves transfer between the gun and greatsword respectively. All have their ranges and functions, which are pretty self-explanatory, alright? The gun shoots from afar, the greatsword's for dealing damage to bosses. You guys get how this goes. But again, similar to the Legions, the combo structure for those weapons gets a bit repetitive. Personally, I never found much need to switch between the various weapons. I often put out the greatsword every once in a while towards bosses, but for the most part, the gun really got the job done, especially once you start leveling it up. You could shoot enemies from afar and up close, and it does a lot of damage, and a lot of your Legion sync attacks with the gun are AoEs, so there really wasn't much of a point to using, say, the X-Baton or the Greatsword towards the end game. I mean, the gun shreds through enemies, especially the fact that you're going to encounter a lot of ones that are flying. Now, not to say you shouldn't switch between them at all, that's not true, and I definitely started switching between them at certain sections of the game. I'm just saying, personally, I really thought the gun was carrying me. On top of the janky combat, there's also a decent chunk of really stupid instant fail stealth missions, which is, in my opinion, unacceptable in 2019. The iris being a really forced mechanic is also an issue. I don't have to use it for darn near everything. I mean, if you want to examine the health bars of your enemies, you have to whip out your iris. Why? I'm sorry, maybe I'm missing something about the combat, and please tell me in the comment section if I can do something different to fix these issues I have with the game. But for me, the main story's gameplay was subpar and underbaked to say the least. I know the game was in development for a while, but it really feels like they could have used a delay or two to fix at least the camera angles, chain jumps, and annoying segments with platforming in the astral plane. Or maybe tighten up combat a little bit more, add some more combos, something. This game just feels rough around the edges, and if you can get past that and enjoy it, that's okay. I get why people like the combat and enjoy this game. Me personally, I just couldn't get over the various hurdles and game design choices in the game, so it made the whole thing really infuriating for me. Please don't take any of my critiques on the game personally either, that's all I request. The game does somewhat recover in the post-game, where the bulk of it is boss gauntlets and open spaces along with larger but smarter enemy encounters. This was a welcome change from the cramped streets and hallways that played the main game story, which led to the poorly designed camera and controls. So overall, how do I feel about Astral Chain? For me personally, it's rather disappointing, at least in terms of Platinum's games. As an action game, I suppose it's okay, it does enough to get the job done, but as a Platinum title, it's really missing some of the Platinum charm, which in turn adds to the game's rather generic anime aesthetic. It just looks like another run-of-the-mill cyberpunk anime. I mean, the X-Baton is literally something straight out of Psycho-Pass. The motorcycle scenes feel like Akira. You guys get the gist. It's not the suave yet gothic appeal Bayonetta 1 and 2 have, the futuristic yet modern takes Metal Gear Rising and Vanquish provided, the comic book look of Mad World, the plastic figure Sentai feel of Wonderful 101. You guys get it, and the sea of games dripping with style in Platinum's library, it's really strange that Astral Chain, both in gameplay and aesthetic, don't feel like a Platinum game, rather a game imitating what they've seen Platinum do. The wild storylines but with no subtext or deep meaning at all, that feels lazy and convoluted for the heck of it, boring combos and gameplay, the world and how it's the same as other generic cyberpunk animes. It feels like if, say, Bandai Namco tried to rip off a formula like Dark Souls or Bloodborne. Oh wait, sure, I'm being a bit harsh on the game, and I'm sorry about that, but there's just a lot that I wasn't a fan of here, and even the stuff I did enjoy was hampered by way too many issues that really hold the game back for me. It's just a disappointment that could have been great, but was released a year or two too early. And that is going to do it all. Thank you so much for sticking with me as we look at the Platinum Games retrospective, dude. This was a lot of fun to tackle. I had so much fun playing through all of those great Platinum games. It was such a blast experiencing the history of one of the best, if not honestly the best video game company out right now that just makes constant banger upon bangers. They had a couple missteps, a couple games that weren't the best, you know what I mean, but even then their most okay games are pretty decent. Overall, it is a shame we have to end on a little bit of a sour note with Astral Chain. I'm not saying the game is bad, and again, if you like things about it or enjoy it, that's wonderful. I'm glad you can enjoy a Platinum game, and hopefully you'll pick up some more in the future or go back to the back catalog as proven throughout this retrospective and check out some of their other stuff, because all of it is very, very good. It just personally wasn't for me. I didn't really like the control scheme and what they were trying to do here. I like some of the ideals they're going for, but maybe a little bit more time in the oven and some fleshing out, and it could genuinely be one of the best games. I think Astral Chain 2 will fix up a lot of the issues I have with the game, especially like the way the Legion call systems works and stuff like that. And it really should be one of like the best games ever, as long as they put some more time into it and do what they need to do, man. With that all being said, though, everything all said and done, again, thank you so much for checking it out. If you guys enjoyed this video, please go ahead and like and comment and all that jazz, and down in the description and comment section will be a playlist. I would really like if you guys could share that with other action game fans and character action game fans and platinum fans and all that stuff, because I really want to get this series kind of known. It's one of my most ambitious projects. I had a lot of fun covering it, and I had a lot of fun experiencing the games as you guys had a lot of fun, you know, covering them with me. So again, thank you all so much. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Alright, so with my main review out of the way, it is time to get to those spoilers. This is going to be a rundown of the stuff I liked and didn't like, so let's just get straight into it. Firstly, the whole thing with your dad was so dumb. There was literally no reason for him to die at all. It was done for literally no reason. Your main character could have easily held them back for long enough for you all to jump in through the portal, but instead he decides to play a hero and take him on single-handedly, and I really don't get it. Yeah, I know they were escorting civilians and the other people were defenseless because they just lost their legions, but seriously, he couldn't have just ran into the portal with you guys? I mean, the whole point of having him stay and die feels really contrived and stupid. Not to mention, you barely get to know your dad at this point because it's like, what, a couple chapters, and the rest of the game keeps forcing your dad upon you, saying you should feel sad for your dad's death, when you barely even got to learn about the character's development or anything. I mean, this game even has the audacity to pull one of those Axe Legion things, where your Axe Legion is like a shadowy figure of your dad, and it makes you kind of flashback and get all weepy-eyed or something. And yeah, it's anime and kind of cute, but you could tell the game was taking itself super seriously here, so it just came off as really dumb, and I'm really upset about that. Like, please, there was no need for that. It would have been much more impactful to have your dad kind of travel with you, still try to keep up, you know, be the hero, and then eventually get himself hurt and possibly even die from all the events going on, thus causing the slow downfall of you losing your dad and you losing your brother. I feel like that storyline would have been a little bit better instead of just having him get murked right off the gate and then a bunch of random flashbacks saying stuff like, you and dad used to get burgers here. Yeah, remember burgers? Like, really, dude? Burgers? Like, this is some Star Wars Episode 2 levels of writing, and I can't, bro. That Platinum definitely dropped the bottle. What was going on there? It's also just a really hard change up from, you know, Nier Automata, Metal Gear, Bayonetta, any of those games I just played through, just to get some really generic tribbles. So could have done a little bit better there. And speaking of a little bit better, I would really like if the sibling arc was kind of finished. It felt really rushed, and he had way too many arcs crammed into him at once. The game starts with him wanting vengeance after his dad dies to take back all the Chimera, but after I started talking to and learning that he's just not as powerful as you, he quickly reverts and goes, "Oh, it's whatever, dude. We can just, keep fighting and do what we need to do because I gotta be here for dad." But then exactly after that, he gets really mad again because the first main villain, Jenna, comes out and is like, "Yeah, I'm kind of the one causing all of this." And then he's like, "I can be a hero, I'll be hero." And then he gets murked, he gets bodied. And then he has to go through cyber surgery where he suddenly gets a legion and works as a new division called the Raven Squad, and he's like kind of being turned, he's like pure now or something like that, and something's a little off with him. And then the person who cloned him was this evil scientist at the beginning of the game, who was the one torturing the Legion. So he's like going behind Neuron's back too. So he's a little suspicious. And oh yeah, shocker, he's evil. And he tries to kill the main character, which scares your brother. And then after you come back to meet your brother again, by the tail end of the game, right? He reveals that your brother is a clone, right? The evil scientist guy reveals your brother's a clone. And then your brother, I kid you not, has a mini existential crisis where he doesn't know if he's a clone or not, and he quickly gets rid of it within like 2.5 seconds. Okay? And then after that, he gives himself to the Noah's Ark thing that this scientist is trying to pull, and sacrifices himself so he can take him down. And the game just kind of ends after that. You have like a little heart-to-heart at the very tail end, and it just kind of ends. Yeah, the whole thing was dumb. It was kind of, looking back, I really was upset and just getting more and more livid as I played because I couldn't believe the story was just that trash. And I read all the dossiers and stuff. Like, the fact that the villain plot twist was so predictable was because all the dossiers were talking about how him and Jenna had fighting. Were having infighting and like didn't agree with the Legion project and all that, so it makes sense why they were both villains, and they were both like maybe not they're not even villains, maybe they just all have their own ideals, they're trying to go for that thing, but the stuff they're doing is literally terrorist activity, so it's really hard for me to justify these guys, like, because they're so like paper flat, right? They're just so one-dimensional in their plot twisty ways that it's really hard for me to side with either one of them. They're both just awful and terrible villains and terrible people at that, so I couldn't really like have that pool. And then your brother just gets wrapped up into it, and then your dad gets wrapped up into it. It's just dumb, and they should have just cut that out the game. And then when you die, you transform into this weird thing, like this weird Legion creature, because I guess the Legion energy is corrupting you or something. That was really dumb. It was a good gameplay mechanic. It was really fun to like tear things up, but then in the R12 file sections, you don't even get to use it. So it's like, what's the point of giving me this sweet new mechanic if I don't even really get to toy around with it? I mean, what were they thinking? So, yeah, basically, none of the game made sense, especially the whole, like, villain plot twist, the evil scientist. He kind of wanted to control all the chimeras and make them legions, and then eventually destroy the world, I guess, to restart it in some Noah's Ark thing. And he felt like this was the only way, which I guess is the dichotomy of like destroying the world to restart it versus absorbing the world to give it back to the astral plane who deserves it. I guess it doesn't make a lot of sense, both their ideologies, but whatever. And then we get to the big thing. The Noah's Prime boss fight was the absolute worst. But wait, hold on. Just one quick second. First, Jenna. Jenna was a really terrible villain, but her boss fight was actually really fun. The homunculus, all of the forms were great to fight, and Jenna herself was one of the most fun final bosses in that game. Had a lot of good times tackling that. It was really bombastic. It actually almost made me give the game an 8 because it was just a lot of fun. And then the game kept going because plot twist, which wasn't a plot twist, we saw it coming, but we had to get to, gosh darn, the evil scientist dude. I forgot his name, I don't want to pronounce it, it's too long. And he's trying to do this Noah's Ark thing, and I gotta say it, dude, this is absolutely the worst final boss of all time, dude. Like, he has the dumbest normals, right? He's jumping up in the air, he's launching giant fireballs on you that wipe you. You can't even escape from some of his moves. There's like a vacuum move out there that will like suck you into the vacuum, and if you do not have a Legion, you purposely have to get it. You have to eat an instant kill. So if you run out of Legion energy and he does that move, you purposely get instant killed. When he does the vertical walls, the game's non-existent, bro. Like, you're just gonna have to eat so much damage. You can't even use your burst option because after getting like 3 or 4 hits in, he's instantly back in an invincibility state where you can't touch him. So there's a lot of really dumb things with the boss fight where you can't reach him just because he's always in the air, so you're just using your gun for like literally 90% of the boss fight, and you're just running around and you're trying to bind him. You can't do that. I mean, you can when he's stunned, but he breaks out of it really easy, so it's better to just whack on him until, you know, the stun goes away. As he splits himself into multiple forms, which you have to dodge. Your Axe Legion doesn't work here because even with maxed up defense and all that, he just can't block for long, especially against the bigger charge up moves. And I get the whole point of the boss fight was to make you use all your different legions, like severing the bonds and, you know, shooting him with the bow legion when he's in the sky, and you get the gist. But he moves so fast and all of that it's just impossible. So it doesn't even work as like a Zelda-esque boss fight where you're like using all your different legions, because most of your legions don't even work because the boss fight's like really unfair. I hated this boss fight. Like, it's easily the worst Platinum Games boss fight of all time. Like, it's honestly one of the worst video game bosses of all time, because when it's dry, the Noah's God Prime thing, DX, whatever, that's the driest boss fight. Like, the one prior to that was pretty dry because it was mad easy, you're just mashing ZR and all that, but the one after, oh my gosh, the absolute driest boss fight of 2019. But jeez Louise, they could have done much better with that. Aside from the major story gripes, I did enjoy the smaller story presented overall. The side characters, especially like Lappy, were all great fun to interact with. It's just a shame it's hampered down by such a horrendous plot, dude, because like the main plot is just trash. Also, the best part of the game, the slums mission was great. The pacing there, the people you encounter, the side quests and stuff you do, it was really good stuff. I very much enjoyed that. Other than that, forget the final boss. Forget the main story for the most part. It just needed more polish. It needed more time. It needed less plot twists. Sometimes you just need to play it safe, low key. Nothing wrong with that, dude. Nothing wrong with just a cool generic storyline. That's pretty safe. But you guys just kept trying to up the ante, and it didn't work. And yeah, we could have done better.